Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to another in our series of double shot interviews where we bring in a CEO or a minister or, in this case, David Cunliffe, the
poor old opposition finance
finance spokesman, to talk about stuff that's happening at the moment. And David's been focused on the situation around South Canterbury Finance and Alan Hubbard in the last couple of weeks. What would you like to see the government come up with in this situation? What are you focused on there?
Well, this situation is a big and serious situation, Bernard. It's our largest corporate bailout in New Zealand history, or at least our largest depositor bailout in New Zealand history. The equity guys died. We think that there is an overwhelming case now for an independent judicial inquiry. We say that for several reasons, three really. The first is that it's pretty clear to us that the government has not succeeded in its objective of minimising the cost to the taxpayer while protecting depositors. It's also very questionable whether the actions of those involved in the regulatory train of events were transparent, prudent, and that conflicts were well managed, or potential conflicts were well managed. And that just needs to have some sunlight shone on it. And thirdly, in terms of the outcomes, there is a great deal of concern amongst the public that the equity is not there, that for some people who didn't even qualify under the government guarantee, they got a full bailout, whereas, as you know, many thousands of other New Zealanders have lost their shirt in finance companies with no action from the government. So, this is a $1 billion plus question. There are people up and down New Zealand concerned about it. Certainly it's the #1 topic in the South Island markets other than the earthquake, and obviously we wish our very best to the people of Christchurch. So, number one, a full and independent judicial inquiry at arm's length from government, because government servants are involved in the chain here and that there are questions about the whole chain. Second thing, as an interim step, you know that the Ombudsman is currently investigating the sufficiency of the declaration of potential conflict of interest by the lead regulator in the Hubbard statutory management. That's Simon Botherway, I understand the chair of the committee of the Securities Commission that made the recommendation. We've called for Mr Botherway to respectfully stand aside from his role as the chair of the Establishment Board of the Financial Markets Authority and from his current duties in the Securities Commission until that investigation is completed. That's not to imply that there is necessarily a problem, but it is to say that it is a good and standard practice for senior office holders to take that step while there is an important investigation underway.
So just going back to the government's actions in putting South Canterbury Finance into receivership,
yep.
How could they have saved money for the taxpayer by doing it differently?
Oh, there's a wide range of options, and arguably they chose the worst one, Bernard. The first limb of that argument is that the action could have been taken much, much earlier to have placed South Canterbury Finance in, for example, a statutory management regime where the losses could have been bounded and where the good bank part of it could have traded its way through, perhaps. The holding costs have been estimated by some commentators, taking it from, say, June 2009 through to August 10 when it failed, to be in excess of $200 million. So the government paid, let's assume, around $200 million to buy the option to keep it going. And so the first question is, were there prudent actions that could or should have been taken earlier to either inform the government, or if the government was fully informed, why did it not act more quickly? And as I and colleagues have said, something must have been wrong in the information chain for the government not to have known by at least mid-2009 that there were serious issues. What was the role of the trustees? What was the role of the auditors? Were the officials briefing the government properly? Did ministers know but make another decision? There's a theory that the government knew jolly well that it was in trouble, but wanted to get the public used to the idea that it could fail, so kept it going. Now, that would be a very expensive public relations exercise if that were true.
Isn't, though, the government bound to give South Canterbury Finance a chance to find a buyer and reduce the eventual pain for the taxpayer?
That's a very good question. It's not bound to, because in this case, of course, the taxpayer is paying the tab on the government guarantee, so it is entirely within the government's right to take action earlier if it saw the need. And there are real questions, I might add, about whether South Canterbury may have been operating in breach of any of its covenants or its trustee obligations. If it was not, that may raise some questions about whether those obligations were tight enough. But let's come to the other limb, if you like, of that argument, which is having paid a lot of taxpayers' money effectively to buy the option to recapitalise, why did the government then not go through with it? Now, I'm expecting to have quite a lot of documentation come to me on this issue, and I have only seen some of it so far, but what I have seen indicates that at least one of the deals on the table could have allowed the government to have walked away with a total liability in August of this year of around $400 million. Treasury estimates that their loss from allowing the receivership to occur is $800 million. So there is a huge question. Why did the government walk away from a deal that would have or could have halved the taxpayer's liability? And there are huge questions about that I think can only be answered by an independent judicial inquiry. And that's a lot of money, $400 million plus a $200 million holding cost, $600 million. To put it in perspective, that is more than the increase in the entire health budget for the whole of New Zealand in the last financial year.
But surely the government risked by putting or allowing it to be taken out by someone else, that it lost control of the process. And given that there's been real questions about who's controlling what assets.
You mean after recapitalisation was done?
Yes, and by taking control, the government actually made sure that no more money was lost.
Well, no more was lost than $800 million, being double the price tag it looks like they could have got out of through a recapitalisation negotiation. And if that information is wrong, I simply challenge the Minister of Commerce or the Minister of Finance to come out publicly and tell us what the real walkaway was, because I've had a lot of informants come to me, and I understand that even the advice streams within the Treasury were quite split, that some of the experienced hands in the Treasury felt that on a risk-weighted basis, at least one of these deals was worth pursuing. And, you've got to ask the question. The government effectively paid $200 million of the public's money to buy the option. If none of the options were looking like they were worthwhile, why did they spend a year carrying it through? The government can't have it both ways. If there was no reasonable basis for a recap deal in August 2010, then it should or could have been sorted in June, July, August 2009. That not having been done, why did they not follow through on the recap? Of course there would be some risk, but it's possible to write covenants and to seek sureties such that the taxpayer's liability could have been ended in August of this year.
Now, you've written a blog post on Red Alert about some of the problems in New Zealand's financial markets, its securities regulation, and the risk that permanent plutocrats essentially use the system to make money for themselves. What are your concerns around some of the power players in this situation and whether they have benefited from what's gone on?
Well, I want to make clear that that blog post, which, as you say, is on Red Alert for our viewers,
which we'll link to underneath this.
Link to it. Okay, so I don't need to go through that. But I've made clear on that the comments are general about market perceptions that I've developed in the course of investigating this and other cases. They are not specific to SCF or Arangi or Hubbard investors or others in those chains. Look, essentially, I felt like having a cold shower after I'd spent 2 weeks working through a whole bunch of issues around company structures, effectiveness of trustee arrangements, accuracy and probity of audits, conflicts of interests of people in the market, kind of deals that looked like were being done. Now, at one level, the marketplace is a dog-eat-dog world. You've got to expect that, and I'm not expecting it's love and happiness all the time. But what I absolutely think the public has every right to insist on is that the rules of the game are clear, that they are robust, and that people carry out their roles as they're supposed to. Now, I'm really worried that our trustee system is broken. I believe, and I've been told repeatedly by people, that, issuers have an incentive to find a trustee who's not over-exuberant, shall we say. The more passive, the better. Trustees need to have clients. Trustees, therefore, don't face an incentive to be over-exuberant. Well, who's policing the frontline regulator, and is that oversight strong enough? This is a really important issue for the Financial Markets Authority Bill, currently for Parliament, that we'll be looking at really hard in Select Committee. The public needs guarantees that those who are responsible for frontline market regulation have got the smarts, the ability, the guts and the backbone to carry that role off. And some of what I've seen raises real questions about it. One broker I talked to said he will not allow his offshore clients to invest in New Zealand domiciled and regulated investment vehicles. He insists they go through Australian ASIC regulated vehicles because he calls this the coldest banana republic in the world. Well, that's not good enough. And politicians and our team at the moment is sweating over the question. You've been blogging about it. How do you get the savings rate up? How do we create that pool of capital that will allow our investors and our businesses to thrive? Well, mate, there is no point in building a pool of capital if there's no pipeline from the capital pool to the businesses that is robust. And if it's being siphoned off through weak regulation and self-interested deals and shady deals, that is not okay, because we will all suffer if our market does not have a reputation for integrity.
David Cunliffe, thank you very much. We'll be watching the Financial Markets Authority bill that goes through Parliament and what's happening with South Canterbury, and no doubt we'll have you on again.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Bill.
Great. That was another Double Shot interview brought to you in association with interest.co.nz.